Thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it. I know we have 2 workshops going on at the same time, so thank you for being in this one. This is actually going to be a little bit different than the other workshops. It's more of a discussion with you. And I want it to be kind of as interactive as possible. I'm going to be prompting the panelists after I introduce them to maybe start the conversation. But if you have questions, just raise your hand. Matt in the back is going to come up with a microphone. You've probably got the idea already. The microphones don't actually do anything, but we're recording the session. So we need you to use the microphone when you ask your question. OK, so the topic of the discussion panel is innovation programs at scale. You are looking at a set of program managers. I'll use that in quotes because they all have different titles. And they're among the best, right? They're doing the hardest, most difficult, most complex, most large-scale things out there. Literally, these guys have pretty much the largest programs in our portfolio. And they've been doing it for a long time. So this is basically, for lack of a better term, it's like last call at the bar for innovation knowledge, right? I want you guys, especially if you're just getting started with your program, I just want you to ask as much questions and get as much out of this as possible. Very informal, very casual. Just feel free to ask away. So let me just introduce everyone. Starting here closest to me, this is Genichi Kakafuda. He is the Global Open Innovation Leader at Syngenta. Syngenta's agricultural biotechnology type of company, right? So Kewan Milroy. Kewan works at SAP. He's the Director of Community Innovation. And SAP, big, large enterprise software company. You guys are probably all using it in your organizations. Next to Kewan, we have Andrew St. Clair. He's an innovation project analyst at Cisco. Everybody knows what Cisco does, large technology company. And then last but not least, we have Rob Poole from Quicken Loans. Rob is his title is Business Consultant and Innovation Cultivator. So again, just kind of want to get started. Panelists, you guys will kind of share the mic, so if you don't mind passing it between one another. And then also, did they say if yours are on or not to start? OK, all right, you guys are live. So one of the things that I want to start out with before we actually get into a conversation, I was at lunch yesterday, and I purposely sat down with a group of people that I didn't know. And it turns out that there were some new people just starting their program, and there was actually a prospect there who was just kind of getting a feel for the whole innovation space. And then Rob came and sat down, and Rob was just kind of doing his own thing. They were having a conversation. They started talking about engagement with their employees, and I tapped Rob on the shoulder. I said, this guy won the innovation award for engagement, and by the end of lunch, he was the star of the show. They were all asking him questions. Yeah, they were all asking him questions. They were super intrigued about it. So I want to effectuate that type of environment here, right? So let me just start out actually with that topic of engagement. So when you start out your program, this is pretty much everybody's first priority. People don't know what innovation is. They don't know how to get their employees engaged. That's actually what people come to Bright Idea for. So I just want to actually kick it off with Rob. And maybe can you just tell us a little bit about what your program does and how you facilitate engagement?
Sure. So we started off with, let me just kind of take you back to why we have this weird name called the Cheese Factory, right? So we have a business consulting group that was put together in 2004 called the Mousetrap, based on the age-old concept of we want to build a better mousetrap. And we decided, let's have fun with that. And so that group goes out to the business. Their whole entire role is to find things that are broken, process flow, how to fix it, work with technology and that business unit to get it implemented and changed. So that was like one arm of the many different ways that we kind of solve things. But we wanted to make sure that we also had a way for our team members to be able to put their things in so that even if we haven't gone out and found this, that if they're seeing it first on the floor. They're the ones that are encountering it every single day. So we wanted to know from them, how can, we fix those things. And so the cheese factory existed initially as this small box called Process Perks, which was very, very poorly run. It had one person, I think, all the way through. Even when we changed over to our branding to Cheese Factory in 2006, they had like one person or two people running it the whole time for everybody in the company. And it was pretty unmanageable. It was taking months sometimes to get the ideas. And as we grew as a company, we really started to prioritize the idea that these process changes, even if they're the small ones, are vital to changing our culture as a whole. We want everybody to know that when you come into our company, you have a voice in our company, that you have a stake in it, that we want you to be just as invested in us and our clients and the whole thing as we are with you. I mean, you invest a lot of money when you bring people into a company, between training and all the time you work on helping develop them career-wise. So and they spend a lot of time at your work. So you want them to feel like they want to be there. And the moment that they are invested in that, you've got them hooked. The only good things come from that. So from the top down, Dan Gilbert, who is our owner, you may know him as the Cleveland Cavaliers owner as well. He made sure that the edict was that between him, Bill Emerson, our CEO, and everybody in senior leadership, we would, the first moment you come through the door, when we have orientation, which we call Full Throttle, you're told about the Cheese Factory and here's how important it is. And then we have a culture day called Isms Day. We have 19 different cultural tenets that we try to basically impress upon new team members. In that day, we use Cheese Factory all throughout every one of those isms to show you how it connects to your everyday life. So we've really branded it from the moment you come in the door. And it's not just a suggestion box. It's really a part of what you are when you're a part of our team. And just one last real brief thing about that is that when we go do that, we're not necessarily like, oh, you got to go put this idea in and that's all there is to it. We don't like make it forced, but we make it feel like it's something that makes you a part of what we are. Like it makes you feel like you are belonging and you're not just that new guy or a girl or whomever. And we say, woman, sorry. And we say to you straight out, directly, look, don't feel like you're the first person or you're like the new person that has no idea what's going on. You have fresh eyes. We have been looking at the same stuff for 10, sometimes 15 years, and we see it one way. You can come in and the moment you question it can unravel why we've been doing it forever the same way. We say go from a status quo to a status grow, and as a static environment is not one that's going to grow. So we want new people to be challenging us every single day.
Yep. So that's a fantastic mindset, I think, just to start out with. Rob, can you maybe talk a little bit about the playfulness of the Cheese Factory and also some of the tactical things that you guys do to effectuate engagement with your employees?
Sure. So one of the things that's a barrier to entry, even after all of that, you're still, you're new, your brain's a little buzzing from all this stuff we've been making you sit through. And you're probably like, man, I don't know how I'm supposed to move about and do all this stuff, and I don't want to put an idea out there that makes me look dumb. And we hear that all the time. It's, one of the barriers to entry is that everyone's going to be looking at your idea in the Cheese Factory. It's open to the whole company. So if you put something in that might not be really impactful, I'm going to look poor in my leader's eyes or whatever. So we felt like part of that is that sometimes it just seems really serious. So we tried to break that barrier down. In the whole concept of branding this whole Cheese Factory and Mousetrap thing, we have a mascot named Simon, who is a mouse. And we actually have a mascot costume, but he's also an animated mouse. And so the entire look of our Cheese Factory is animated and whimsical, and he's got different costumes he wears. And when you win like the best ideas, the cheese of the month, as we call it, we bring Simon out to your business area to celebrate and give you your prize, which is we give prizes every month for the top 3 It's like 150 for the first one and 50 for the next two. We give an award for the Ambassador of the Month, which is the SME or the business leader that went in and really took the initiative to drive stuff the most that month. And then we have a Rookie of the Month, which if you're brand new, you've been in the company only 90 days, we want to make sure that if you've been in there and following what we've been asking you to do, that we're taking care of you as well and propping you up for that. So we have a Rookie of the Month, and we give them we create a little baseball card, so it looks like like an old rated rookie card or something like that. So we do that kind of stuff, and then we always try to find other ways to keep everyone involved. We've had competitions the last couple of years called Cheese Madness, and it's like March Madness in a way, but like basically the concept was we wanted to get 2 years ago, we weren't at this level of participation. That was one of my big goals to change. Was we've had all these people, we talk to people up front, we're not always getting everybody in. So let's create a volume contest that's not really concerned necessarily about huge wins so much as just getting you in for the first time, and put a bunch of prizes around that. So the competition was based on, if you submit ideas, you get points for submissions. Whoever gets the most amount of points from those submissions and other factors, essentially gets you to a tournament where you play head-to-head with people, and then the winner got a grand prize of $1,000, and this year was actually $2,500. So what we did was we took our total participation rate was closer to about 35%, and then I think we were at somewhere closer to 60 now. So.
Yep. Yeah, so lots of creative stuff here. 60% of employees, right?
Yeah.
And how many ideas do you have in the cheese factory?
Since we started with Bright Idea, we're at 28,000.
Right.
So yeah.
So engagement. I mean, it's some of the things that he's talking about may sound a little bit overboard, but the creativity there. It's a culture of innovation, and I hear people use that term all the time with us. We want to facilitate a culture of innovation. It's embedded. People love it. It's their day job, right? That's what everybody strives for. I want to get some questions from people around engagement, but before I do that, Kewan, can you talk about the difference between getting engagement from your internal employees versus your customers? Kewan has a program where SAP collects ideas on their software products from their customers directly. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the distinction there and how you go about getting engagement from your customers? Is that harder? Is it easier, et cetera?
Yeah, so quick background is that we started off with basically trying to solve the customer engagement problem online. So we set up an external site that our customers can submit ideas based on our products. And it's doing well. We've got like 25,000 ideas, and we've probably had over 200 products throughout time. But we wanted to expand out of that use case, and so we moved into actually contests with students and that sort of thing. But then we also went internal. And running them is night and day. I'll definitely say that. The customers, it's existing customers talking about existing products, so they tend to be already bought in and very familiar. They don't need incentives. They just be happy if you implement their idea. So they don't want to win a car or even a meeting with your CEO. They just don't care. They just be happy if you solve their problems so they can tell their internal customers they can continue with some great solution. Internally, the big difference, actually a lot of learning lessons there. I mean, I'd say the first rule is run a small pilot, because whatever you think, no matter what you predict or what anyone ever tells you, it's totally not the case. And until you run something end to end, you'll never know. And start off small. And a lot of things we found were, organizationally, you get things where managers say that let's be innovative to everyone, but then, and that's passed down, communications and all team leads and everyone supports that. But then you get a developer who comes to you and says, I have an idea, but I was told not to participate by my team lead. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. One big one is, of course, management said, let's be more innovative, but they never said, oh, you can, lighten up on some of your deliverables. If you lose a person or two for a month, yeah. So that's been a big one. And then the other part is about engagement, learning the difference between, I love this comparison. If you look at technology in the curve, we've since 0, it's like all these technologies, the book, writing, and then computers, and we just got this exponential curve. But you look at how we organize groups and businesses. You look at, you have your CEO and then some commandants and everything, and it's exactly like the Roman military. It's like, I mean, almost, it's pretty much the same, right? So we have not innovated on that model at all, and that's still, we all work for a manager you've got a bunch of peers, and they work for someone else, and that model hasn't changed. So what we realized from a communication perspective is that there's this shadow network within the organization, and that's the group you want to tap into. So we now look at how you engage and find the multipliers within your organization who can send a message out to participate in contests and become active and get them much more involved. That's been a big learning exercise, especially at SAP, 80,000 people, global organization. People in Africa, employees in Africa, they do a lot more via email. People in Germany do a lot more things when it's face-to-face. So that communication mechanism is different throughout the world, and you have to be conscious of that, or else you're not meeting your diversity initiative, which of course we know promotes better ideas.
Yeah. So does anybody have a question or two? Remember, if you could just raise your hand for the microphone, just around engagement and what these folks are doing. Yep.
So the issue that you just raised about people not being given the time to be innovative, you acknowledged it as a problem, but what are you doing to help solve that? I think we all struggle with that one.
So first of all, I mean, SAP has so many different innovation programs. They're kind of like, it's a lot of cowboys, but there's a lot of problems with that too. So to say how some have solved it, so we have one program, it's an entrepreneurship program, which takes, instead of just taking someone's idea as a solution, it takes the person who creates it and gives them some time. And basically our I don't know what you call them now, our product and innovation lead, the guy who owns that area, if someone's idea is chosen, so you're allowed to work on it kind of like Google 20%, without really formally saying it, but you can just work on it a bit. But if your idea is chosen, you get 2 months. You and another colleague get taken out of your role for 2 months. And that's been it's almost, I'd say, a strict mandate in the sense that if you have an idea which is kind of a low barrier to entry, and you don't really have to ask for permission for that, you then get chosen. It's hard to say, no, this person can't continue. And I think the other thing that's happening, I wouldn't say it's formal, but the discussion that I'm going to lose 2 people from my team, I can't meet my results. I mean, it's kind of weird to say that you have to have that, but there's been a really big focus on listening to our employees and taking their ideas and having those be able to bubble up. And we've been doing that for years, but there's always been, it doesn't bubble up high enough, right? So it never gets enough funding. There's lots of stuff like that. Just everyone's innovating, but 90% of it might not go anywhere because it just doesn't have the process to.
I think there was another question. Kirpal?
You talked about the shadow network, a multiplier effect. How do you find these people?
How do you find them? For the couple campaigns where we've used that, it's usually people who are involved in the campaign, the lead, and then kind of the communications people, knowing people like that. If you have the connections into each of your regions, you can literally go ask who seems to be the person that everyone listens to. And I wish we had, some software product that analyzed this, but it's definitely a social networking software product out there, a model out there where you'll see these, you'll see like one person in the center and then 20 people or 100 people around them, and they hear and follow. And that's the type of person you want. And just as an aside on that too, when you engage with them, make it very quick and very discreet what you want them to do. I want you to send this email template to your group, and here's what it says, and send it to them. It should be 2 minutes of their time, because they're busy people and just like everyone else, and they will do it. And all they need to do is just say, hey, check out this contest. It's really great, and there's lots of opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But it's hands and knees. I don't know. Yeah. We haven't done analysis on emails or anything like that, but I'm sure there's stuff you could do.
Yeah. I think even if you pick them up on the internet, you send them an email, that would still help, right? Generally.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely try it. I mean, we're still learning that one.
So I want to change gears a little bit and kind of zoom out. And obviously engagement, really important type of outcome as you're getting started with your program. But these guys are way beyond that point. So I want to talk about success and what that means to your program today versus what it's meant in the past, and where does that go from here, basically. And I'd like to start with Andy from Cisco. They've got a fairly comprehensive program. They do all different types of activities hooked into the CEO and so on and so forth. So Andy, can you talk about success for your team?
So you've got to define success, right? Innovation is a really long journey. Cisco's been doing this in partnership with Bright Idea now since, I'd say, close to 2008, so eight years. And it's only in the last, I'd say, 2.5 to 3 years that we've actually been able to measure a tangible business impact figure or outcome from a lot of these ideas. So that's a huge lead time, right? So prior to the last 2.5 years, when we've actually been able to measure an impact, we've had to justify the existence of our program to the broader Cisco community. And a lot of that is done through just grassroots innovation, measuring engagement metrics, making sure that success stories do go out there. We ran a hackathon, a workshop, make the leaders look good, make them look innovative. So it's been a lot of that up until the last 2.5 years. And over the last 2.5 years, I mean, we've really accelerated our program through being able to work with a lot of the idea owners and the project teams that are built to capture the finer details, the intricacies around what impact does their idea deliver to the business, whether it's time savings, revenue generation, cost avoidance, and really build metrics around that. And it gets really quite dirty. There's no magic wand that you can wave over it. It's a very consultative type approach that Cisco uses still.
Yeah.
I'd leave it at that.
And so actually speaking of the kind of dirtiness of trying to find and measure outcomes, Genichi here, he's also doing a variety of activities, and he deals with people across the globe. And he started out with something that was really, really complicated to do, especially for Bright Idea architecturally and so forth. Genichi, can you talk about dealing with the dirtiness of trying to track things in your organization and perhaps like, you know, the disparate geographies and stakeholders and so forth that have to fold into that?
Sure. So we work with, we use Bright Idea as an internal crowdsourcing platform. We also work with a lot of external platforms, third-party crowdsourcing platforms. And, you know, there's such a diversity of things that you can do with crowdsourcing that the outputs that you get, some of them are tangible and you can measure them, and some of them are very intangible. Probably a lot of it is intangible stuff, but probably some of the most valuable stuff is the intangible stuff that you get in. So what we try to do is at least track the tangible stuff, and I think that alone you can justify, and you get enough return on investment that just justifies your program. So as I said, we work with a lot of different crowdsourcing platforms, and I asked each one of them, you know, how do you measure the return on investment in crowdsourcing? The consistent answer I get back is, well, when you figure it out, you come tell us. So it is messy. It is very, very messy, but it's so diverse. So, and the applications are diverse. So, you know, you're going to have a lot of that anyway.
Yep. And have you seen any successes or specific, challenges in terms of rolling all that stuff up across the disparate platforms, geographies, stakeholders, et cetera?
Yeah, we're a global company. You see a lot of cultural differences. For instance, from our UK site, we'll get a lot of ideas coming in because they're very good at solving problems. From the group in Beijing, they're a little bit shyer about posing a solution because they don't feel like confident enough that they can post a solution, but they'll post questions or challenges. And so you do see that sort of cultural difference that you want to try to balance out and get as much diversity of inputs into solution making as you can. But it is difficult, but that's one of the advantages of the IT platform, right, is it's 24/7. China is 12 hours opposite from where we sit in North Carolina. So being able to get input at night and then seeing it in the morning and working working through that helps a lot.
Yep.
By having that platform, because either that or you have meetings at 7 or 8 or night, or 7 or 6 in the morning. So.
Yep. Does anybody have any specific questions around success and outcomes, whether it be financial or non-financial? Take one in the back first.
Andy, you touched on something I think is pretty important, which is making your sponsors look good. Are there any success stories or any points of advice that you could share that really worked well for you?
I think, so we do a lot of case studies. So every innovation event that we run, you always have to follow that up by a case study, announce the top 3 winners of that hackathon publicly, give them the reward and recognition that they deserve, and obviously then thank that challenge sponsor or thank that hackathon sponsor for their involvement. And I think that raises a bigger problem, is that in innovation, in any innovation activity that you're going to want to run in your businesses, it's obviously critical to have that sponsorship buy-in, because they're the ones that are going to be able to support you, not just from a communications piece in that front end of innovation, the fun stuff running the hackathons and the workshops, but flipping across to the back end of innovation where it gets dirty. That's where you actually have to implement the ideas within the business. You have to track down the SMEs, the engineers that can actually do the work. You have to connect the idea team, who might have a great idea. You've got to connect them with the builders, the people who can actually do it. So yeah, does that help? Yeah.
I think there was another question up here.
Thank you, everyone. Have any of you been on the ground floor of kind of implementing and launching the Idea Center? So like day one, here is the Innovation Center within our company. And if so, what are some key learnings that you've had along the way?
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys are at the center of that. I don't know, maybe Rob, if you want to start, you had an interesting start.
Work our way down.
Well, I wasn't there when we first launched our innovation, but the one thing for us is that we've been introspective every year, every few months even. We're looking at our process, we're trying to basically tweak it, make it work better, because we know that there's no such thing as magically perfect. It's never going to happen. So in the sense that, this is a great example. At one point, all of our innovations sort of kind of flowed through just Mousetrap. It was just Mousetrap doing it. They were aligned under IT in our, and as far as our business groups went, and that was the end of it. That was how it was for years, and no one even challenged that. And then when Cheese Factory came along, again, under Mousetrap and IT, 2 years ago, we broke that out and decided that we're going to split everything apart. And Mousetrap and Cheese Factory now exist under Client Experience. And Bullet Time, which is our 20% time, which was tied to Cheese Factory before, was split off and became an IT project. So you're always reinventing how your innovation network is going to work, so long as you're introspective enough to see that what is or is not working. And I think you always have to have checkpoints to come back to that and say, is this exactly how we want to do it? Like our SLAs that we have for our team members, 24 hours in, you get a message that says, we've seen your idea and we're going to start digging into it. By 90 days, we have yes or no, not implemented yes or no, but that we're going to go forward with it. But by that point, and then from there, we work on for the next 6 months trying to get it implemented. Before that, it was sort of scattered, and whenever we could get to an idea and get it done, it would happen, but it wasn't as confined. And we've just, as along the way, felt like, just as any client outside the company would expect you to have a thorough process and a quick timeline to move through their loan, as far as we're working, we'd want the same thing as team members from the Cheese Factory and our ideation team to say, hey, if you're going to go through and go through these ideas and tell me what's going on, I can't just let it go in a black hole and never know what's going on. So as a whole, you're always going to have those checkpoints. You're going to set up those toll gates to figure out, all right, is this the right process for us? And If so, what should we change? So that you're even if you're starting at the ground floor today, it will never look that way within a year, maybe within 2 or 3 months even.
Yeah, so and another interesting thing with regard to that is that, a lot of these guys are dealing in multinational, tens of thousands of employee type of organizations. So the inception of innovation, I mean, there's been a lot, what we see at Bright Ideas, there's pockets all over the place, and then these guys are starting a program for a particular purpose, right? So I don't anyone else? I mean, I know Genichi, you went from 0 to 1 basically. Do you have any advice for people who are
Yeah,
kind of just starting out?
Yeah, I wasn't there at the launch of it, but as Rob said, it's an evolutionary process, and I think in the beginning, the first thing, as has been mentioned before, you have to have senior management support and resources to launch it. And with the launch, there was kind of a mandate that you shall crowdsource to the organization. And everybody crowdsourced, and then it starts to drop off, and because they fulfilled their duty or their requirement. And so, as Diane from GE mentioned yesterday, we also did the shift of focusing on providing value to our customers. So we're again a center of excellence or service organization. We facilitate the use of different platforms, and we've put a focus on really getting value and impact for our customers the best way that we can, so that it becomes sustainable, that it's not a mandated sort of thing, but it's something that can continue and grow from the ground up over time. So we've implemented different ways of trying to create value for our customers. We try to be better at engaging with them and really understanding what their problem is. We found that when we went back and looked at some of the solutions that came in, you go back a year or two later, and a portion of them were never implemented as solutions, even though at the time they met all the criteria that was set out initially as the criteria for an acceptable solution. And so when you dig into it, you start to find out that maybe we solved the wrong problem, and so. And that wasn't why it was engaged. Or maybe we were looking for too disruptive of a solution, and they really wanted something incremental, and they didn't want to blow up their workflows or processes to implement something that was way out. So we spend more time now engaging with them, trying to understand the root problem. There's the old story about they'll come to you and say, I need a 1/4-inch bit, can you find one for me? And what they really need is a 1/4-inch hole. And a bit is not necessarily maybe the best solution for them. So we try to understand their problem better in the front end, so that in the back end, we get more impact because the solution was actually implemented in their process. So it's evolved from an initial sort of you shall crowdsource to let's focus on creating sustainable value to the people that we're trying to serve.
Yep. Any other?
Yeah.
Please.
So so much I agree with that, and I think just a couple things, maybe as recommendations, you can take them or leave them. Going back, I probably would have liked to have a consultant who knows this stuff inside and out, and just put it all in perspective, because hackathons, contests, challenges, they're all different, but when you start out, it's all the same. It's really hard to see. Yeah. And so two things for that. One is get someone to talk to you from a strategic perspective, just about innovation and programs and how, what your goals are. And then they'll be like, I want to talk to your executives. And so that's a really good conversation to have. And then get a perspective of where you should focus. And then running your first challenge, it's such a waste of time to screw up on the process. The process is it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward and boring. But the subtle little questions on how do you define a good problem statement, and you'll spend hours on that, but you're asking the wrong person. Like your audience we're actually just talked some of this. Is it the retail staff person, or is it an engineer who has technical ideas about and knows computer knowledge? And that thing that you don't hear that anywhere, but that is the rocket science. And to have someone who's been through 1,000 of those to help you niche that out will just totally set you up for success, as opposed to definitely, you get all the way through and you've done it and you've nailed the process, but the ideas suck, or you're your team is like, we don't want to offend anyone, so we're going to kind of like them all. And it's just, like, and then, yeah. And so you start to get in cultural things on just pleasing people and that sort of thing. And you need someone, a professional, to come in there and say, no, we're not even going to start this if that's the way you're thinking. But it's hard when you don't have that confidence and knowledge of the experience.
Yeah, everything these guys just said, just start small and scale. I think there was an analogy that was used earlier today, which was to dial in the radio. It's like you have to get that perfect channel before you turn the volume up, and that's what it's all about. It's interesting. Cisco, we're obviously a centre of excellence as well, but we've developed a franchise approach, very much like McDonald's. We've set up little teams around the Cisco business, and we're helping them to dial up the volume as well, so that they're running their own programs, and they just all report back up through us centrally. And we just check off the business outcomes, verify that dollar figure is indeed correct and verified, and just feed it up the chain. So, yeah.
Yep. So again, want to change gears a little bit, keeping in mind, very different organizations, very different goals that need to be achieved. Rob doing kind of suggest type activities, 20% time he mentioned. Andy at Cisco basically does everything under the sun. Kewan goes out to customers and tries to collect enhancements to software, and Genichi doing more discussion forums and technical problem-solving challenges, scientific organization for the most part. How do you guys resource these types of activities, and how has that resourcing kind of changed over time as you've tried to scale up and build impact in the organization? And Andy, if you want to start.
That's a good question. I mean, Cisco, big company. We've been fortunate enough that we started in a very small engineering community, actually. So we started with our support engineers. Deployed the Smart Zone or Bright Idea platform. We call it Smart Zone. And just used that as a proof point. Make sure that we had good traction. We were getting ideas submitted. We were, at the time, trying to move ideas through to the incubation, implementation, so we could develop some sort of success stories at the end of that. And then, after we developed that proof point, we actually are now centrally funded from the services organisation. So we get a nice fat budget every year that we can then allocate to various resources and activities that we need to accomplish. So, yeah, it's sort of easy days for us, to be honest, compared to a lot of the guys I've spoken to.
Yeah. Yep. Anyone else? Kewan, since you have the mic.
Yeah, sure. We're a small team. I mean, it's funny because our product enhancement stuff, we have like 70 of those right now, and then the internal ones anywhere from like 5 to 12, and there's 2 of us. It's brutal, and it's good that I'm one lazy and 2 don't like making decisions. So I try to design processes and things that reduce the effort. You can definitely automate a lot. I've been I think Greg will share this too, is you push a lot back onto the teams. So really setting an expectation up front. The comms, I mean, SAP is really good at communications internally, apparently. I didn't know this, but they are. Yeah, there's a lot of connections, a lot of communication. So we'll review communications. We got our best practices, but we push that out, and that's a big time suck doing all that. I live off PowerPoint templates in the sense of not ones that you'd ever present to someone, but just build them up and put every single question in there, and you have to fill all these fields and all this sort of stuff. And it's interesting as you walk through that with people, with stakeholders. And you start asking them like, oh, how would you like the first question I ask is, they all first of all want the platform and how they can customize it. So I have to reel back and just say, what lever do you want changed at the end of this? And they're like, oh, like what do you mean? And I want a bunch of ideas. I'm like, no, like what's your business lever? Forget innovation. And so resetting expectations really helps, I think, get them prepared and a lot more educated, as well as a little more comfortable that it's about business, it's not about the tool and the platform. And then what happens is a lot of stuff just flows, I think, from that. But definitely pushing back as much as I can onto the stakeholding teams. Yeah.
Rob, any comments around resourcing?
So our team is about 8 to 10. It seems to fluctuate when people go and change roles and whatever, but all of us handle the stuff that comes into our ongoing challenge all the time. And then we run, so we do a lot of almost everything. So we have pitch day, we have a challenge for bullet time, which is our 20% time ideas to come into. But what we do with everything outside of pitch day and maybe one other initiative like Summer of Cheese, which is our pitch day for interns that come in during the summer. Outside of like a few of those big things, we basically set up targeted challenges that the business area has to run themselves. So I'll put I go design the whole thing based on what they're looking for. We have that opening conversation that says, all right, so what are we looking for? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? And here are let's set the time, like the deadlines and how this is going to work for the checkpoints along the way, so that you have the right people in there going through the ideas, that you can judge these ideas in a way that is effective, and it's not going to be something you just toss aside when you're done. Because that tends to happen when you build out a lot of challenges, is that the business owners are really super into it in the beginning, and then when the work part comes along, they're not as thrilled with it later on. So keeping them engaged is always a trick. But I try to stay, after I built it and we've gone through that initial basic tutorial and walkthrough, I try to only do check-ins and let them actually own it's their own product at that point. I mean, they're going to have to be the ones that take whatever they decided was the idea they liked and push it towards implementation and prioritize it on their end. So I'm only there to hold their hand to some degree, and then from that point, they need to run with it. So a lot of times that's how our targeted challenges work out, where we're just, we got to basically set the parameters up front for everybody. But once you get that point and everyone feels pretty comfortable with it, it's pretty easy to get to the end. It's just a matter of whether or not we can get it implemented in a timely fashion.
Speak to it a little bit. So we, while we're considered mature, we still have a long ways to go. And so I think it's important for us to be directly funded. And so we actually support all of the challenges that we run, because we're still trying to break through across the organization and change the culture of the organization to use these types of tools for innovation. We also help manage innovation process called TRIZ. I don't know if everyone's aware of it, TRIZ, but there's an exercise that you go through. It's called Ideal Final Result. So we went through the exercise of figuring out what is the ideal final result for our group, and we realized that the ideal final result was that we don't exist anymore as a central service organization, because it's embedded into the culture of the organization to use these tools. But we're still a long ways off of that. And so I think it's important to have your own sort of central funding so that you can keep this rolling until it catches momentum, a lot of momentum.
Absolutely. Okay, so any questions on resourcing the program? Greg, I think you have one here.
So I think that most of us would agree that innovation as a whole is ideation, creativity with execution, right? And I think it feels like execution is pretty much everyone's problem, right? So maybe this is a bit abstract, but do you think we do ourselves a disservice by calling ourselves an innovation group when we're not responsible for the most important part of it? Because does that give them a feeling that we're going to make it happen? Because I think, and centrally funded, I mean, I'm centrally funded, but I'm centrally funded for the ideation, creativity part, not for the execution part, right? Yep. I mean, I'm just kind of curious on you guys' thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Well, so we've changed our name. We're not. so we are. That's the maturity part. Yeah. So we used to be Open Innovation, but Open Innovation is really a lot bigger than that. So actually, we call ourselves now Crowdsourcing and Innovation Systems. What we think our endpoint is that in a lot of our processes is we deliver a project that's going to get funded into the portfolio, or we deliver a collaboration that's going to get funded, or we deliver a technology idea that will get implemented, or it gets archived. So we see that as the end of our what we call the fuzzy end of innovation. So we do execute to that point. But yeah, you're right. We aren't taking it to the market. Sort of.
Andy, I think you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, very, very similar to that. I think the incubation piece is... So let me start again there. The name of my team, Services Innovation Excellence Centre. So we're an excellence centre, we're a centre of best practice around innovation. We really nurture the innovation. We provide, I guess, that best practice and the frameworks for these teams to work within. So we've got various offerings around lean startup approaches that we can help direct the best idea owners or the best idea teams to. We help to connect a lot of the dots around the business. We've sort of mapped out the whole landscape, so to speak, of Cisco, so we know who to go to for what technology or what type of service we're dealing with. So we're facilitators, we're glorified facilitators. But in saying that, we are working with other external vendors like Top Coder to help rapidly prototype various ideas that are of potential merit to try to sort of stimulate that incubation piece. And then taking one step back, every activity that we run within the Cisco business around innovation, number one thing is to make sure that sponsor, that executive sponsor you're running the activity for, has the resources and funding to execute themselves. And then you obviously need to make sure whatever activity you're running is targeted so that it aligns with that sponsor's strategy, because otherwise you'll be shooting from the hip. And
So it sounds to me like you need to come up with a cartoon mascot and some whimsical name for your team so that nobody knows exactly what you're supposed to be executing on. So we are in I have to say, we're in a severely unique position at Quicken Loans. We don't have to put ROI behind our stuff. One of our isms is numbers and money follow, they do not lead. So we try not to drive everything based on financial return on investment so much as we're trying to drive like, all right, is this going to make our life for our team members better or our clients? You know, the other thing too, right? Some of these things will directly affect our clients because that experience, whether you're a team member or you're a client, drives our business as a whole. You know, I really truly believe that having the cheese factory and having that voice leads to happier team members, which leads to winning the computer world's best places to work, which then that happiness leads to people being more invested in their work, which then and really, really providing an enjoyable experience for clients, which then leads to 9 J.D. Power Awards for, you know, best servicing and best mortgage origination in the country. And I think that all plays a role and starts right through the Bright Idea application in many ways. So, yeah.
Yep. So only have about 10 minutes left. Sorry, go ahead, Noam. I would actually just preface, if you guys have any questions, let's use this time now, whether it be starting the program, objectives, outcomes, etc. Let's just take whatever questions you'd have at this point. So, Noam, you have a question?
Actually, mine's not so serious. How did you come up with the name Cheese Factory?
Well, Cheese Factory was, so the whole we built Simon around the mousetrap name, you know, the Build a Better Mousetrap thing. And we thought it'd be kind of fun to have Simon in a factory where he could go get all these little cheeses that are delivered to him, essentially. Those cheeses being people's ideas, right? So you know, it's sort of weird because I've also kind of joked about it and said, well, to build a better mousetrap, that means our mascot, essentially, we're figuring out a way to kill him. But all that being said, it's the cartoony cheese factory gimmick works really well for people because I think that they're like, it may not be the easiest thing to remember. You know, what was that called? The innovation, whatever, because it sounds very corporate after a while. But there's no way you can forget what the cheese factory is. So that's how it works for us.
Any other just general questions, Kirpal? Okay, sure.
I'm curious, sort of on a percentage basis, just to maybe make the answers a little bit easier and shorter. For the four of you, would you say that, or what do you think the percentage split is in the time or the effort or money, however you want to characterize that as, that you put toward like process improvements, internal kind of incremental gains versus actually putting together new business lines and incubating a substantial new business line? And so can you kind of describe how that goes for you?
So let me have a first crack at it. So in my experience running a lot of these innovation activities and helping to lead some innovation strategy at Cisco, what we find is the way a traditional business functions with their quarter by quarter KPIs and targets, just to some extent it does hinder the innovation process. And what we find is when we're scoping out business problems or opportunities to solve for in our activities, that these teams want to demonstrate results fairly quickly. So when you look at, I guess you're all familiar with the 3-horizon approach. Horizon 1 is a huge focus area. It's low-hanging fruit. It's process optimization, process enhancement, product enhancement, I guess. And it can be capitalised on fairly quickly with real business results captured and articulated. So in terms of answering the question, percentage-wise, we find, I'd say, a good 80% of our activities are in that H1 bordering on H2 sort of area. And that's where we can demonstrate real results. I mean, 10-minute engineer time saving scaled across a 70,000 person employee base is massive. Yeah.
Do you frame it that way as well? Like when you go out to challenge, do you frame it that I'm looking for quick wins or?
No. We lay out the options and then let the organisation we're going into decide what works best for them. I mean, if they want a lead time on a project to be 2 years plus for potentially one of those H3 huge new revenue channel type things, then yeah, we'll help them do that. But if they need to deliver results now to justify their own existence, let's focus on H1. Let's get it done.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, it make me think of Coca-Cola's marketing team, and they break up they have 70% for operations and 20% for new business and 10% for innovation. And so in a pure sense, I'd almost say that an innovation program may never focus on the 20%. Like once you've tried something and you're like, oh my God, this could be $1 billion idea, well then it goes to a team. You're done the ideation and you're done the pilot projects, right? Or at least it's in the second phase of the POCs, and it's like it needs to get some higher visibility, higher, things like that. But you do have, of course, you have contests and challenges that you run that could ask for incremental ideas by nature or more disruptive. I mean, definitely have to decide that early on, because what you ask and who you ask is what you're going to get. We've had a couple. We're running one right now with a team, and it's killing me a little. But it's called Fix It, and it's about customer experience, and they want to know what's broken and the problem with the process. And they fundamentally just believe that, we're not talking about growing beyond, we're just talking about filling a hole. And so it's a struggle, but I couldn't get them to talk about another way, and it's a bit of branding. So you get stuff like that. So they're absolutely fine with incremental ideas. And I made that 100% clear. They're not getting anything disruptive out of this. And then another team we had called 1 Billion Lives. It was run for all of Asia, where we basically wanted SAP's products to touch 1 billion people by 2020. And so it's coming up with ideas on, okay, we need some sort of medical thing, and we should go into South Korea and engage with their medical system, because that's going to touch 300 million people or something like that, like that sort of thing. And so much more disruptive ideas came out of that sort of campaign. But we're done. Like once those ideas came in and they decided, I have no idea what they're doing. So we're definitely not as tracked from a revenue perspective, but I do see that as the next step for us is to start keeping the relationship with those teams and seeing 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, how do those things pan out.
It's interesting that you mentioned having something called Fix It and for more incremental changes. We actually are running the same thing. So one of the bottlenecks that you may all run into, and we are currently running into, is that whenever you have big projects, are kind of the big things you want to do, right? Rocket Mortgage, we just launched that. That took practically all of our IT resources to pull that off. And now we're just trying to better it. And so we've never really pulled those guys back off again. And so we have to, because of that, we don't have anybody to really focus on the quick hits. So that sometimes come through the idea, like the ideas in Bright Idea, and sometimes they come from business areas. So we are running, our 20% time team is running Fix It, where we take a focused set of ideas that have just been sitting there, and we all know they're all quick hits. And then we're going to run them through and try to get as many of them done in I think, a 90-day time span. So, I mean, it was interesting that you mentioned that, because that, too, I think everybody's going to run into that at some point or another, where you got really great big projects. Everybody sees the big wins in the big projects. It's harder to get people to see the wins in the smaller things, and they financially aren't going to bear out as much fruit, right? So now you're going to have that focus shift at some point or another, where you're going to have to make that choice. Do we still want to go with those? Because they're obviously good. They're still good for the company. They're just not that, you know? And you have to figure out with your IT team and with whomever else is behind that, to determine how can we address those things so that these things don't fall off the radar and just completely get erased. Because a lot of these things are process improvements for your team members. A lot of these things are small, incremental things that improve client experience. And they're good. They're important to have. So you want to make sure you don't lose them.
Just on that note, so for our external product enhancement one, where we have customers, all their product ones are continuous, so they're continuously providing feedback. And the big thing is, of course, my idea went in a black hole. And unfortunately, if there's 1,000 ideas, the product team can only do so much. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if there's 100 ideas or 1,000; they're still only doing 10. And the face value to a customer really matters a lot, because if they don't believe you'll do them, then they stop engaging, and then no more ideas and you fail. So the approach that we've recommended for them, and it's actually, some teams have done it, some teams haven't, is you get 1 or 2 big ideas, a couple 5 medium ideas, and then a boatload of the small ideas. And I like to call them popcorn, because you just wolf them down. And we've had some teams which actually, the product management review process, every month we sit down, every quarter, go through all these ideas, you get quotes and talk to your developers. It's very intensive, but a lot of the popcorn ideas, a developer can do it in half a day. So they bypass the process. You'll have someone in the lead who can make the call, and he just gets these ideas and just throws them at the developers, and they just bang them off. So all of a sudden you have 50 ideas done, and the customers are like, oh my God, you just done an amazing amount of things, even though it may have taken 4 days of developer time, compared to one idea which takes 6 months. And that, imagine, because it's constant, it's for the whole company, you want to show that you're listening and you are taking action. It's a critical piece, I think, culturally, and just motivationally, incentive-wise, you need to keep it up. Yeah.
Yeah, Genichi, any comments about the
real
mix?
quick. So we're focused and funded by R&D. So we haven't gotten involved in building new businesses and business models or products. But being focused in R&D, we can work on developing new ways of doing science and research. And so right now, agriculture is becoming much more digital. You have sensors and drones out in the field collecting data, and biology is becoming digital with the genome sequencing being dropped. And so with the shift of our industry moving into the digital field, and us not having the skill sets internally to try to explore and move into that area, crowdsourcing is a great way to get those skill sets and those consultants or those technologies in to shift your business. So our soy R&D team won the Edelman Award last year, which was from Informs, which recognizes excellence in analytics for industry and humanitarian purposes. And that was because they built a suite of analytical tools to help the soy breeding process, since that's becoming more and more digital. And about 90% of those tools were developed through crowdsourcing platforms. External platforms, yeah. Because we don't have the skill sets internally.
So,
mathematicians, statisticians, we needed the modelers.
1 or 2 other kind of general questions, Kirpal?
Yeah. The question I had was crowdsourcing fatigue. Like, I'm sure people get tired, How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it interesting? Is it multiple? Do you limit how far apart these challenges are run? It's a general question.
We're working with Kara right now for us to develop a custom tool for us that allows us to manage alert systems so that our community can select what alerts that they receive. So they say, okay, I want anything that's related to chemistry, I want those alerts, but I'll turn off the biology ones, I'll turn off these ones, and so that we can manage the system so that the people who are interested in certain subject areas and are interested get those alerts in a more targeted way.
Yep. Rob, maybe if you want to respond to that quickly, and then we'll just...
Yeah, because we cast a lot of different nets, and so it sometimes feels like, wow, you guys are throwing a lot of stuff out there. But we kind of keep everything on a set schedule. So pitch day happens once a quarter. You have the always open challenge is always open. So you may, if you participate in pitch day, you may not have something to put in that always open challenge. So, we're just trying to get something out of that person that might not have put something else in. And anything targeted is specific just to a business area. So a lot of times that alleviates it because we're not always running a targeted challenge, in that same business area. And if we do, it's very short term. So I would say if you're worried about it, like make sure that your audience isn't included in 100 things at once. If they're, because always open challenges for us, they'll always be there. But like when we do a banker targeted challenge, the bankers are just that month, they're probably not going to put a whole lot into the always open challenge. So we're cool with that because they're participating in the targeted challenge, and that's really what we want their focus to be on, and that's okay. So I think as long as you kind of keep people on a set schedule for the stuff that is for everybody, and then only use short time frames for the targets, people typically feel like they don't have to be in everything at once. They can just pick the one that they want to be a part of.
Yep.
Do you advertise, how often do you go out and say, look, we've got this open, innovative challenge out there, or do you just do it once? Or, I'm just saying.
Sure. We do, outside of the Cheese in the Month email, the only time you really hear a lot from us, like we'll come out and talk to different business areas during a quarterly meeting or something like that, but we don't really make it well, let's get it in their face for the whole thing. It's like usually 5 minutes of fun and we give them swag, and they feel like, all right, cool, it's awesome that they came because they gave me all this free stuff. So, I mean, even if they didn't listen to a word we said, they got stuff out of it. So, at the very minimum, they'll be looking at that stuff on their desk later on, and then, oh yeah, Cheese Factory.
You do it more informal ways or open challenges, like materials and promotional materials.
Right. We're always doing something to just kind of keep people engaged, but we don't go too far with it to drive them over that edge. Because I think that if you, while it's part of the culture to be engaged with it, it's also we don't want to drive you to the point where you don't want to do it ever again. So there's a fine line always there, but I feel like if you keep it fun and you don't and you keep the ones that you really that are open to everybody on a time basis that they know, all right, it's that time again, so I guess we're going to be seeing this. They don't feel as overwhelmed by it.
Yep. So I know everybody's itching right now. Real quick, one piece of critical advice for those who are just getting started on their journey, and we'll just go down the line here and then conclude.
There's success in every failure. And I say that because even with Cheese Madness, we got all of that participation, but out of all those ideas that we got, there weren't a whole lot that were amazing that we wanted to implement. I mean, so nothing more than our normal implementation rate. So we have to completely go back and revamp it, but we still saw the success of the participation rate. So now we can build on that and come up with something better the next time around. No matter how much you think this didn't really reach the goal you were looking at, you learn something from it, you can pull something out of it, and you can make things better the next time around.
So mine would be short and sweet. Build relationships with your engineering community, well, for Cisco anyway, because they're the guys that can actually implement a lot of these tool process enhancements. Yeah, that'd be.
I already said one which was hire consultants for your first startup beginning. But to add on that, I think I think I mentioned this one too, is definitely the pilot. You'd be surprised. I mean, we ran one where 1,300, it was actually about 300 people, We had one team that had about 150 people in it, and we expected to get the most ideas. Their manager committed. They delivered 0. We had another team out of Latin America, 95 people. We had like 30 ideas from them. That was ideas, and there was multiple people on those teams, probably half the people of the organization. You never know. You're all set up for success, and you can predict what you're going to get, but you just sometimes never know until you run a pilot. So start small and then grow. You'll learn a lot about your organization that nobody else knows.
I just repeat what I said earlier, which is to focus a lot of time on defining the problem really well. Really get to understand what the root problem is, and so that you have impact in the back end when you get those solutions and that they get implemented. So focus on that.
Fantastic. Let's thank our guests here.